more minute and see if a couple other people. Terry, you have any idea if anybody else is joining? Hard to know, right?
I'm not sure who, yeah.
Okay.
Who is up on the left-hand side? The gentleman. Oh, no, that's me.
That's hilarious.
I'm looking for Sam, I guess. Is he there?
No, none of the men have joined yet. This seems to be a sisterhood today.
Oh,
But who knows? We could get some.
how many people are allowed to be?
Wow,
this?
we can host. We can host up to 500, but yeah, but typically
longer.
nah, look, it's it makes it a little bit more. Yeah, it's a little bit you know, it's harder to have conversation when you're that many people. But I've had some that have been over 400, but most tend to be anywhere between, you know, 10 and 40, I would say.
Yeah. Well, that's a good sized group.
Yeah. And we do them more and more for, you know, for families that are looking for special events, birthdays. We did a birthday party the other night with somebody who wanted a special tour, bar mitzvahs, special programs. So lots of different things to do it. And we have Frank Hertz here. Welcome.
It's really Ruth Hertz.
Oh, it's Ruth. Okay. Everybody's throwing me with their names tonight.
You can rename yourself if you want, but it's fine.
Well, I think we'll get started, and those who will join in will join in. I want to welcome you all. My name is Elisa Moed, and I am the CEO of Traveluya, which is located in Israel, and the time now is 6 p.m. So it's 11 a.m. there. It's 6 p.m. here. My company is Traveluya, and we are the expert source on Holy Land travel. We have a website which has over 1,000 pages of regularly refreshed content, and we've been doing tours in Israel for over 14 years, arranging special trips for families and Jewish federations and churches and synagogue groups and many other types of missions. And also for private families and bar mitzvahs and wedding vow renewals and baptisms. And since, of course, COVID began 8 months ago, we've been, you know, staying connected with people through offering educational virtual programs like the one that we're doing today. So it's really wonderful to have you. I know your time's valuable, and we just really hope that you enjoy this session, find it really interesting and also meaningful at the same time. Before we get started, just a few things to bring you up to date on what's happening, you know, here in Israel, where both, you know, I am and Itamar Ben David, our tour educator, are located. We recently had a lockdown, and we've emerged from it, and we are slowly reopening. There is no tourism, but we expect hopefully, and maybe by next summer, people will start to come. Schools are starting to reopen, but I have to say our most exciting news here is that we have a new normalization agreement with the United Arab Emirates and also with Sudan and Bahrain, and we're very hopeful that other Arab countries will join into this over the next maybe few months or years. And we're very excited about the prospects for peace. And speaking of that, just the opposite. Today, we're going to be focusing on the revolt, you know, when there wasn't peace, revolt against the Romans after the fall of Jerusalem, after the fall of the Second Temple in Jerusalem. And we'll be looking at Masada and really taking a look at the site. We'll learn about Josephus Flavius, the story of the Zealots, who fled from Jerusalem, and Herod's magnificent palace at Masada, which has remained pretty much intact. I mean, not the entire thing, but there is a lot to see there, and it's remained intact for over 2,000 years. And before we begin, I do want to take a moment for two things. One, to congratulate you with your historic elections of the first female vice president and your new president-elect. I understand it was the most safely guarded and they say without any kind of issues in history. So you deserve a congratulations, especially when we hear about so many other elections in the world that are not democratic. And we hope that with your new administration, that your COVID numbers will get under control and there will be a vaccination schedule that's quickly implemented so that most Americans will be able to receive the vaccine, which is obviously very exciting, you know, between Moderna and Pfizer, that they've come out with this, they've finally figured out a vaccine and hopefully it'll be able to get reproduced and distributed very, very quickly. So without further ado, let's get started, and I'm going to turn this over to Itamar Ben David, my partner and tour educator who is in Jerusalem.
Oh, good.
And Itamar, I'm going to make you co-host right now.
You're right.
Thanks.
Okay.
Elisa, you started the recording, just to make sure?
Yes.
Okay, fine. Hello, guys. Pleasure to be with you again. I hope you can all hear me well. If there are any communication problems, just please let us know because we want you to enjoy this beautiful program. I'll just say that we are in the beginning of the month of Kislev, okay, the month of Hanukkah. Hanukkah is going to be at the end of the month. And this is about the revolt of the Jews against the Greek Empire. Now we're actually talking about the revolt against the Roman Empire. And something interesting about these two revolts, once against the Greek, it happens in the winter time, and the revolt against Rome ended at summertime. So there is something about the extreme weather, the very cold weather of December in Israel, the very hot weather of the Israeli summer that creates the revolt. When you look at the celebrations of the Jews, it's actually in the middle, springtime, Passover, or Tishrei, autumn time. Very interesting, comfortable weather. And this is, I think, something that is very special about our holidays. It's taking place, it's on moderate weather. The main holidays are taking place in moderate weather. So this is, again, just a little introduction about the time we're in. So this is one little thing to start with. I want to take you now on a quick flight from New York. I guess you all recognize this building just over here. Yes, I'm on the spot, I guess.
Home,
right?
sweet home.
Here it is, Brookdale. So you are on the map, guys. Now, our flight is going to be very quick. We're just going to jump. Whoop.
Let me know if you need anything.
Okay.
Above Manhattan. I'm simply going to jump and go further up on our special flight to Israel.
If only it was that quick.
Yeah, right. We'll save a lot of hustle. No COVID issues on this flight. No need to wear masks or anything like that. We're just crossed the Atlantic. We're halfway there. Crossing Gibraltar and Spain. Here's the Mediterranean. And in the eastern side of the Mediterranean, we have Israel waiting for you. So here we are. Our plan is actually to talk about the main site we're going to talk about, of course, is Masada. Masada is situated near the Dead Sea. That's the lake that you see over here. Masada National Park. You can see it in the middle of the screen, Masada National Park. Don't worry, we will get back to it. You can see the terrain and the brown yellowish colors of the desert, the Judean desert. But in order to understand what happened in Masada, you can't avoid understand the background in different other places, such as Jerusalem, which is over here, where I'm marked. You know what, I'll draw it. It will be even easier to see. So we will talk about Jerusalem, about Caesarea, which is situated over here, halfway more or less between Tel Aviv and Haifa. We will talk about the oppression of this revolt in the Galilee, just to point it out, in the Galilee and in the Golan, just to mark two places over there, and the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem, and then we'll get to understand what was going on in Masada. So we're actually touring in a few different places just like that. We're going to cross the entire country in less than an hour, if you don't mind. So that's our plan. Cool. I hope you're okay with that. Please, I encourage you guys to ask questions. You can add questions to the chat. Okay, so please don't be shy about it.
And we'll also have a chance at the end of the program. We'll open it up to questions as well if you don't want to write in the chat.
Yes. And I'm going to go a little bit back and forth from the presentation to videos and photo spheres of 360 degrees. That's going to be interesting, and you're going to enjoy the visuals. So I call this session Hope Between the Ruins. That's how we call it here, because here in Traveluia, we do think that there is hope even in these ruins and this crazy story about the revolt. So let's find out about it. When you go to the Western Wall in Jerusalem, there is a section where you can see actual destruction from the days of the Romans. It's called Davidson Center. And next to these ruins, this rubble that you see over here, this pile of stones that were knocked down from the Western Wall, today, Baruch Hashem, right? Today we are having bar mitzvahs. You see that? You see the bar mitzvah boys over here, over here? So as I said, there is hope between the ruins. So just to illustrate it, and don't worry, we'll get to see more of this hope that is hiding. In this picture, you can see a lady. I took this picture about 2 years ago in the Western Wall. She was wearing sackcloth to mark the sadness and the grief on the destruction of the temple. This was a little bit before Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av, that commemorates the destruction of the first and the second temple. That's how it looked like clearly before COVID, when people were allowed to gather and pray together. This is in Tisha B'Av, 9th of Av, about a year ago. This year with the pandemic, we couldn't help, we couldn't pray at the wall. So people were praying outside their shuls or the synagogues. And that's how this Tisha B'Av looked like. People are sitting on the ground and reading Lamentations, etc. I will start with this picture, and I need you to be a little artistic and take a look at the architecture of the cities that are described over here. And soon enough, you will find out we're talking about two important cities. You can see the Tower of David over here and the walls and the tomb of Absalom. This is Jerusalem on one side over here. On the other side, you can see another city. You can see Titus Gate over here and the Colosseum. You can see the side of the Colosseum. This is clearly Rome. And the sages have a saying that these two civilizations can't really stay together. So not Rome exactly, they say it actually about Caesarea, the Roman capital of Judea. And they say that Caesarea and Jerusalem cannot coexist. One is up, the other one is down, or the opposite. And they were very, very right about that. And we're going to see how the revolt even started by visiting Caesarea for just a little bit. When you enter Caesarea today, it starts with a display of sculptures. And this is exactly the beginning of the tension between the Romans, that were, of course, pagans, and the Jews that were monotheists and rejected those sculptures. So when you just look at these sculptures, immediately you understand, as a Jewish person, of course, you immediately think about the 10 Commandments and how it violates these 10 Commandments. I am the Lord thy God, not these sculptures, of course, not these different polytheistic pagan gods. Thou shalt not have not other gods before me, no other gods before me, right? Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image. Okay, this is all not allowed. So clearly you can understand where the tension even starts. Just a very basic of the clash, I would say, between these two civilizations. When you walk in the market of Caesarea, this is always remind me this commandment, remember the Shabbat, because this market was open 7 days a week, okay? The Romans, once they visited Jerusalem, they said, oh my God, you have to see that. It's a city that only works 6 days a week and not 7 days a week. This was one of the marvels of Judea for the Romans. They couldn't believe that the Jews would skip 1 day of work. Okay, so this was very, very strange for them. And again, this is one of the sources of the tension between Romans and Jews in those days. This is the theater, and not too far from it, the theater in Caesarea, that's what I'm talking about. And not too far from it, there was a hippodrome for horse races, and also an amphitheater for gladiators, okay? Meaning there was entertainment that involved death in Caesarea, you see? So of course, they shall not kill, and we reject that. So for those of you who visited Caesarea with me, I'm just doing a little recap again about this tension. Let's continue now, and we're heading now to other places in Judea and Jerusalem. We're talking about the oppression of the Romans. Soon after King Herod's death, Herod was still Jewish, but the people that followed him, his sons, were not very successful in governing Judea, and they were replaced. They were replaced by Roman governors, and they were extremely cruel, overtaxed the people, enslaved the people, really exploited the Jews. And even if they try to reject it and reject this oppression, they were even crucified. What you see over here is a tunnel that is located in Jerusalem. It's a part of the city of David. And just about, I think like 2 years ago, they have found this podium. What you see here, this podium, it looks innocent, as if someone is going to just say a speech over there. But no, this podium, most scholars think it was used for crucifixion. So that's probably what it looked like back then. There was a street and a podium to stack this, these poles with the crucified people. This is again a part of that oppression. In Jerusalem, we've actually found, this is the only place in the Roman Empire's archaeology we actually found proof for someone that was nailed to the cross. So this is pretty cruel and hideous death, of course, terrible. The leaders of Israel at that point were the priests. Since the days of Hanukkah, the Maccabees, the leadership is the priests of Israel. Now, the priests were told to sacrifice for the sake of Caesar. Okay, so this is of course something they couldn't undo it. They had to do it. They were forced to do it, and they just have to deal with that. What you see here is this man, Gaius Florus, one of the Roman governors at that time. They forced the priests again to do that. Now, the priests on one side, they were the leaders of Israel. On the other side, they had to cooperate with the Romans. And in the Jewish quarter of Jerusalem, we find many evidence that they were very wealthy. The priests were very wealthy because of that collaboration. One of the families, family names is Katros. That's what we found over here. And we know that they collaborated with the Romans based on rabbinic literature. So that's how their villas looked like. So they live under oppression and under a Roman occupation, but they can enjoy the good life because of the little autonomy they got for themselves. In, as I said, the Jewish quarter of Jerusalem, we find their houses, their villas, and different unique tools and vessels they were using, including stone vessels for purity. That's what you see over here. The Romans absolutely controlled Jerusalem, and the people were upset. They were overlooking the temple and definitely the holidays, and it was very, very upsetting for the Jews. And at some point, they decide to revolt. They decide to revolt to resist this oppression. The place where it started is back to Caesarea, the synagogue of the revolt. There's an actual place. That's how it looks. I'm just showing you a little bit of the mosaic floor over there. And that's how it looks like. Just by the sea, the mosaic of the ancient synagogue of Caesarea. This is where the Great Revolt has started. Of course, the Romans could not afford themselves any revolt against them, and they had to oppress it right away. Before we get to the war itself, I just want to show you the terrible situation the Jews were in internally, internally, meaning the Jews were divided between themselves to few sects. I would say 5 different sects. So they were not united as a group. They were separated, and there was no one agreed leadership. And that's why ultimately, according to the rabbis, we lost. We lost the war because there was no unity between us. And this is almost like a common theme in the Israeli discourse. Why aren't we united? Why can't we here in Israel be united? We're dealing with COVID. Why can't we agree on something? So you understand that this this mentality is ancient. It's not just from back, not just today, of course. So what am I showing you now? This is a map of Israel. You can see the coastline, Mediterranean, just over here. And I'm just pointing out where the different sects usually lived. The priests that are also called the Sadducees, they lived in Jerusalem. The Kohens, I mean, okay, they mainly live in Jerusalem and the nearby area of Jerusalem. This is one group. The rabbis, they were really everywhere. The Pharisees or the rabbis, they lived everywhere in the country. That's the second group. A third group lived in the Galilee and later in other places. That's the Christians. The Christians were actually a part of Judaism at that point. Fourth community lives in Qumran. These are very unique priests, Kohens as well, and they had their own ideas, a separate sect. And the last one is what we call the Zealots of the Galilee, very nationalistic group that really wanted to oppose the Roman occupation. So we see that the situation, the political situation in Judea actually is not helpful to deal with the Romans. Let's continue. When the revolt started, these people were the the generals of the Roman legions that were sent. Vespasian and his son Titus, they will both become Caesars just during the revolt. The revolt started in Akko. The campaign, the military campaign of the Romans started in the Galilee in a place called Akko, and from there they marched and crossed the Galilee all the way to the Sea of Galilee with series of battles that took place in this region and in the Golan Heights that are just up here in the eastern side of the Galilee. So that's how the terrain again looks like. This is of course a Google Earth map, satellite view. So again, from Akko, the Romans advanced in their campaign. Who are these Roman soldiers? That's how they're called. I'm just showing you a modern manhole of Rome, in Rome, that has this acronym SPQR, Senatus Populus Quirentium Romanus, the Senate of the spear-holding Roman people, okay? They are all fighters. The Romans are all fighters. They are holding spears, and the Senate represents them, and they are going to battle. They will conquer 2 main places in the Galilee. The first one is called Yodfat. And this place is very important for our story because this place is where a very famous historian, Josephus Flavius, he was the commander of the revolt in the Galilee, and this is where he was captured. Back then, that's how Yodfat looked like. It was a fortified city, destroyed by the Romans, and its inhabitants and its residents were massacred. We actually found that in the archaeology. They were massacred, and Josephus Flavius was surrendered. Between the ashes, he surrendered. And according to his story, they decided to have a mass suicide between them and not to fall to the hands of the Romans. Only him and one more person were the last one to stand. They did not suicide. They killed the other members, and they were supposed to kill themselves. And then they said, no, let's just turn in to the Romans, and God will help us. And Josephus Flavius is coming out from a cave that is already filled with people that died and or committed suicide, and he tells Vespasian, I'm not just an ordinary person. I'm a messenger for you. I'm a Kohen. I'm a priest, and I'm telling you, you are going to be Caesar. Okay, you are going to be Caesar. It's written here, I'm not a traitor, because that's one of the things he says about himself in his books. I didn't betray. I just understood that it can't go on. It will be oppressed. So there is no point in losing life. During that year, 66 CE, this is when the revolt started. 3 years later, we have the year of the 4 emperors or Caesars. And during this civil war that was going on in Rome, Vespasian actually takes the throne in Rome, takes over Rome, and sends his son to continue what he started, to continue the oppression in Judea, the oppression of the Great Revolt. They will also conquer a place called Gamla in the Golan Heights. This is the weapon they used. You can see the ballistra balls over there. And this is the mountain of Gamla. Over there, too, we hear the story of mass suicide of 5,000 Jews, according to Josephus Flavius, that throw themselves from the top of that cliff to their certain death, just not to be caught by the Romans and fall into captivity and be enslaved for the rest of their life. So these are the 2 places that Josephus Flavius tells us about this mass suicide, horrific. Well, let's continue to Jerusalem. What was going on in Jerusalem? We're talking about 40 to 50,000 Roman soldiers that invaded the city after a series of battles. And the people of the soldiers of the 10th Legion, they destroyed the temple. They burned the temple. They were not the only one that conquered the city, but they are the one that destroyed the temple. They're called the 10th Legion. They torched the city the temple on fire, and let's see soon who they are. I'm showing you now a coin that was minted in the occasion. The Romans minted it. It says in Latin, Judea capta, Judah captured. And you can see the Roman soldier on one side and the Jewish widow on the other side, mourning for her loss. And this is again what they minted to tell the world about how Jerusalem was captured, Judea was captured, and the revolt was successfully oppressed. You can see over here the famous Titus Gate in the honor of the general, okay, the son of Vespasian. This is the Colosseum, where many Jewish slaves found their death after the revolt. They were captured, they were sent to slavery, and some of them ended up in the Colosseum. Sorry, let me rephrase it. Ended up in, not the Colosseum, ended up in an amphitheater. Okay, they were massacred. Okay, the Colosseum was actually built 10 years after the revolt, and in inscriptions that we found in the Colosseum, it tells us that it was built from the spoil of war. Which war? The war in Jerusalem. So the treasures of the Temple of Life in Jerusalem were taken to Rome to build this Temple of Death in Rome, where later on many different slaves, including Jewish slaves, will find their death. Okay, so this is again the connection between Rome, the Colosseum, Titus Gate, and Judea. The 10th Legion, I promised to say just a few words about them. This is an inscription of that 10th Legion, had a very interesting symbol. The wild boar that you see over here, this is their symbol, a non-kosher animal that invaded the temple and destroyed it. How interesting is that? I mean, out of the 30 legions that the Romans had, the one with the symbol of the wild boar is the one to destroy the temple. I don't know if it's a coincidence or not, but this is what it is. Okay, let me stop here just for a second. I want you to be nicely oriented about where we're going. So here's Google Earth. We talked about the destruction. Yes, Elisa, you wanted something?
Yeah, maybe we can unmute and see if anybody has any questions at this point.
Please, guys, please do. This is the first half of our tour, just the important background to understand Masada.
Maybe we can unmute and see if anybody has a question.
Please, guys.
If you do, just unmute, or you want to ask to, or raise your hand. No? Okay. Looks like
Good.
everyone
Yeah.
is.
Following.
Okay, great.
Fantastic, guys. Please don't be shy. I'm here for you. So here we are. This is Jerusalem. And from Jerusalem, we will go east on Highway 1 to the desert, all the way to the Jordan Valley and the Dead Sea. That's how you drive to Masada. It's about an hour and a half drive. From the junction over there at next to Jericho, you will go south, just like that. And one of the places on the way to Masada is Qumran National Park. Just remember that. We'll get to it. Qumran National Park, very important place. You will carry on south and you will get to another very, very famous place in Israel, En Gedi Nature Reserve. Please remember that. We will have to address this as well when we tell the story of Masada, okay? The nature reserve. You will continue for another 10 or 20 minutes drive and you will get to Masada National Park, which is just over here. Now, I want to show you a little movie of Masada. Yes, I think you can all see that. And if it's a little choppy, then don't worry, you'll see more pictures of it as we go. But I just want you to enjoy the scenery, the terrain of Masada. You can see a Roman camp. That's what you see here in these ruins. You can see the ramp and the mountain of Masada. That's what you see here, this mountain of Masada, the ramp that the Romans built to conquer Masada. You can also see the palaces on the northern complex. That's also the northern complex. These are the palaces that were built by King Herod. 3 palaces in the northern side, 1, 2, and 3, built on 3 steps, and 2 other palaces on the southern part. 5 palaces. Trust me, he didn't spend 1 night over there. We're looking just, we're just above these ruins of Masada. Just want you to see that it's not too far from the Dead Sea, of course. The walls of Masada, just over here. Very impressive structure on the top of a mountain, top of an isolated cliff in the middle of nowhere, really. It's the southeast corner of the Roman Empire at that time, and that's how it looks like. Why would the Romans even care about the people that were the Jews that revolt over there? They can't harm anyone. Why would they care about that? This is a conundrum. We'll try to solve it as well. Okay, so we see the ruins, we saw the walls, we saw the ramp, the palaces, and I think we're okay to continue. I'm showing you now a picture of a very famous archaeologist called Eliezer Sukenik. This man was digging not in Masada, but in Qumran. And in Qumran, he found the Dead Sea Scrolls, very famous scrolls. Why are they important for our story? Because of the end of my story, you'll see why it's important. We're going to talk about a few scrolls that were found in Masada. So in Qumran, we know that there were Kohens, priests that lived over there. These are their ritual baths, their mikvahs. These are the vessels they used for purity, and they were scribes. Okay, you can see the inkwells and the scrolls. That's how the scrolls used to look like. It's written in Hebrew. If you do read Hebrew, you need a little training to really understand the words and the letters. I can understand some of it, but it takes a little bit of training because this is Second Temple Hebrew. It's a slightly different font, clearly, than the one we have today. These types of scrolls were found by the hundreds in Qumran, about 1,000 of them. And this is probably one of the most important finds we have in Israel. Only 14 scrolls were found in Masada, but those who were found in Masada are very important to understand the end of our story. Okay, I'm moving forward now. This is the entrance to Masada. If in normal times hundreds, if not thousands of people are visiting this site. Today, we're talking about a few tens of people a day. It's ridiculous. Because of COVID, the numbers had dropped, of course, dramatically. Only very few Israelis a day would visit it, and it's insane. I mean, for us as tour operators and tour guides, it's unbelievable that you see Masada so empty, just like most of the country. Now, Ruth, I know you told us that you haven't been, you wanted to climb up for sunrise or something, right? So here's your sunrise over Masada and the Dead Sea. You're welcome. And if you want to say something, just open the microphone. So this is sunrise over Masada, guys, just over the Dead Sea from Jordan. This side is the mountains of Jordan. We can't really even see the mountains. That's how it looked like for sunrise hikes to the top of Masada. So I was with this family from Texas, and you can see again the Dead Sea just over here. And the sun is just shining over here. So if I fulfill the dream for one of you, then I'm already happy. The bottom of Masada, that's how it looks like when you start the journey on daytime. You can see the cliff. It's about 1,000 feet higher than the surface, about a mile walk. So it's very, very steep, clearly, you see. Climbing 1,000 feet during 1 mile walk. It's not the easiest, of course. It takes about 1 hour, 1 hour 20, depends how fast you do it. For those who don't want to climb up, of course, there is the cable car, and that's how it looked like. Ruth, there is a cable car since the 90s. So this is after your time, after you visited. So anyway, that's how the cable car looks like. Once you get up there, you will definitely see the snake path. The snake path, that's what you see over here. This is the main entrance to Masada in ancient times. And the supply that King Herod had for his palaces came from slaves with donkeys that brought up all the supply. We're going to see the supply that he had up there. It's unbelievable. They walked back and forth 2 times a day, maybe 3 times a day. You can just imagine what it is to be a slave back then. This is the archaeologist, Yigael Yadin. He's the son of the man I showed you earlier, Sukenik. He's his son. And Yigael Yadin is a very special man. He was the chief of staff of Israel during the Independence War. In the 1960s, after his army service, he became an archaeologist following his father. And in the 1960s, he was digging in Masada. So how interesting is that a Jewish Israeli general of the modern state of Israel is digging through the ruins of the ancient rebels of the Jews of revolt against Rome 2,000 years earlier. So this is quite interesting. And he was digging there, as I said, during the 1960s. This is Ben Gurion visiting Masada during the excavations that took place over there. And everyone were very, very impressed and followed the news very closely to hear what's new, what else they're going to find in Masada. I will talk a little bit about King Herod now, just to explain why this person built in the middle of nowhere this palace. So first you need to know that King Herod built 7 different desert palaces, okay, and fortresses. Masada is just one famous fortress he had, but he had another 6. Okay, so why does he need all these desert fortresses with palaces, with bathhouses? Why does he need all that? It's very simple. In America, it's called doomsday preppers. It's like he's like a prepper. He's preparing for the moment he will be kicked out by the Jews that had enough with him. But why would he care about that? Why would he be concerned about that? Because he's Jewish. Why would he be afraid from his Jewish brothers? The reason is very simple. He was responsible to the death of the dynasty that was before him, the Maccabees. It was actually him and his family were consultants and governors that worked for the Maccabees. And there was a moment in history that he actually took over the house of the Maccabees, killed almost all of them beside of one princess. And that's how he became the ruler of Judea, meaning he was not a legitimate king in the eyes of the Jews. He was like a slave, a Jewish slave that took power, and that's why they were so upset with him. So he said, okay, in case of emergency, I will have somewhere to go to, and that will be a very convenient fortress, not just somewhere to hide, but somewhere that I can live for a very long time and rearrange myself for battle. These are the palaces in the northern part. You can see a round one. There's another one over here, and I will show you the third one too. What's interesting about this palace, it's that it was supported by retaining walls, by massive retaining walls. And this is the retaining walls you see over here. It's built just at the edge of the cliff, hundreds of feet above the surface, meaning I'm sure there were many slaves that fell into their certain death. So when we are talking about a famous fortress, a famous structure, you always have to remember the cost. People died to build these structures, and this is again no different in Masada. So that's how it looks like. There were frescoes, beautiful columns over there. Again, you can see that here too. This is the lower level. You can see again the frescoes and the paintings. This is all original. I'm showing you now some mosaics. These are the bathtubs that he had in one of his palaces. Beautiful mosaics. That's what you see over here. And we're taking care of it during that day. And over here, I want to show you something interesting. You can see the mosaic in his palaces, but you can also see something strange. You can see this very weird looking wall over here. This is actually a little kitchen, a little stove of the rebels, built by the rebels. From burning Jerusalem, 900 people were fleeing from Jerusalem to Masada. These are the rebels that were on Masada. We're talking about 900 people. And they said, okay, we'll reorganize and fight back against Rome. They destroyed the temple, but we're not willing to surrender yet. And they came and they killed the Roman soldiers that were on the mountain. And they started to settle. We're talking about maybe 150 families, more or less, or 200 families of 4 or 5 people. And they divided Masada to rooms, different rooms, and one lucky family had beautiful mosaic in their new home. So this is the kitchen of Jewish family that lived over there for a few years during the revolt. What else do we find in Masada? We find coins. We find coins of the revolt, from the days of the revolt. We find glass, beautiful glass vessels. We found combs and different, combs and different tools for women, for makeup, etc. That's a little bit of what we find over there. So we're certain that it was not just the beautiful Herodian remains, but also the rebels that came, let's say, about a century after Herod's death, a little less than a century after Herod's death. Take a look, please, at this complex over here. What you see is actually massive, really massive storerooms. So just to make it clear, I will draw it. You can see the storerooms. Maybe I'll use a different, I can make it thicker. Okay, I think it's better. Yeah, there you go. Check it out, guys. You can see one storeroom over here, another one over here, another one over here. It goes on like that. The rest of the rooms, these are massive storerooms. Okay, so it was built by King Herod. The supply is from the days of King Herod. And what did we find? What did the archaeologists find when they were digging through? Lots of jars, lots of pots, lots of vessels for oil, for wine, for fish sauce, for applesauce, grains, dried fruits, you name it. Okay, they find a lot of these supply. Herod basically said, okay, if I'm going to be kicked out of Jerusalem by the Jews, I'm going to live forever after in my comfortable palace with my wives, my children. He had 10 wives and 16 children, and I'm going to live here happily ever after. So this is again the things that we find in these storerooms. What kind of food we had? As I said, grains and also pecans, walnuts, seeds of grapes, some myrrh, dates, pomegranates. How amazing is that? That we actually, 2,000 years later, we actually find these, the food pretty much intact. I mean, you can actually see the walnut and the pomegranates, it's pecans, you can actually tell. Interestingly enough, there were a few scholars that actually took seeds of these dates and planted it, and guess what? The tree actually grew. A tree actually grew. A tree from 2,000 years ago, and we call this tree Methuselah. Methuselah as the ancient, the oldest man in the Bible. So now that it was a male tree, we're looking for the female tree from Masada, and then we'll have the dates of the ancient times. Let's see if they can find one. Water in Masada. There was no shortage of water in Masada, although it's in the middle of the desert. King Herod built very sophisticated channels and aqueducts that fed massive cisterns at the bottom of the mountain, and slaves with donkeys took the water up. And altogether, we're talking about 10 million gallons of water on Masada, 10 million gallons. So even if he's there with his family, with his soldiers, he could stay there for years and years and nothing would happen. They can just enjoy it, just like 1,000 Jews lived there during the revolt. Okay, and they had fresh water, there was no shortage. Okay, before we get to this picture, I just want to show you a little bit of Masada in like 360 visual. Just like 1 second. Oh, not this one, sorry. Yes, okay. I'm going to share my screen now with just few photospheres that will help us orient ourselves. So what you see here again is the bottom of the mountain, the bottom of Masada, and that's how high up the mountain is from the surface. Here's the Dead Sea, just far over here. Here we are, quick jump, and we're on the top of the mountain. This is the flag that the flag on the top of the mountain, the flag on the top of Masada. That's how it looks like. And the palaces are mainly in the northern side, just over here. I'm showing you now the Roman bathhouse he has on the top of the mountain. So let's enter to it, if you don't mind. You will see beautiful frescoes, beautiful paintings on the walls, and the tiles. Let me just show you some of the tiles. It's not perfect, but you can see the triangular, beautiful tiles, red and black, just over here. This is original, what you see here. Let's enter further in to the main sauna. That's how it looks like. It's a beautiful room, really beautiful. And we actually have the double floor to let the hot air enter in and create a dry sauna. It's a dry sauna. Now, the amazing thing is that just next to this dry sauna, they have found something that was in use in the days of the rebels. In the days of the rebels, they didn't care at all about the fancy schmancy bathhouse of King Herod. They built themselves ritual bath. They didn't care about the hot bath. They cared about the ritual bath, the mikveh, because they didn't want to be, they wanted to be clean, but it was not about being clean. It was about to be pure and keep the commandments as they should. So what you see here is from the 1960s. Yigael Yadin was not sure what is this pool that he see with the stairs. He invited a few rabbis from Jerusalem to check it out. They were reading the Mishnah. They were looking at what they see, and they said, wow, this is like an ancient 2,000 years old mikveh, ritual bath. We also find these vessels for purity. So we know there were Kohens on the mountain. And now I'm showing you En Gedi. Now we have to ask ourselves, why would the Romans care about these 900 Jews in the middle of nowhere? And this is the answer. The answer is that these rebels attacked En-Gedi, where there was a very unique groves of perfumes, of herbs of perfumes. It's called balsam. And when they damaged these groves, they actually damaged the private property of Caesar. So he cannot allow that to happen. So it's not only because of the Roman policy not to leave any burning ashes after the revolt, it's also because they damaged the groves of perfumes in En-Gedi that I mentioned earlier. Okay, what else they did? The Romans, soon enough after they destroyed Jerusalem, they had to deal with a few other places, but in only 3 years after the destruction of Jerusalem, they are dealing now with Masada. How did they conquer Masada? It was very, very quick, actually. So what you see here are the camps. Let me just draw it for you. Here, you can see some square over here. That's one Roman camp. Over here, you can see another Roman camp, just over here. Over here, you can see a third Roman camp, just over here. And you have to believe me, there were 8 Roman camps. Also, they built a wall all around Masada, a wall of almost 2 miles. That's the wall. You can maybe see the rubble over here. You can actually see some rubble over here. This line is actually artificial. This is the ancient wall of the Romans. How long it took them to build 2 miles of wall and 8 camps and the ramp to conquer Masada? Believe it or not, it took them 2 months. 2 months. We're talking about 10,000 soldiers and auxiliaries. It took them no time. For them, it was just another day in the office. We are raving about Masada, the last stronghold of the revolt. The Romans couldn't care less. For them, it was just another day at work. And guess what? We actually found a paycheck of one of those Roman soldiers, a man called Gaius Messius. That's his name. It was a cavalry. And we actually found his payroll, one of 5 payrolls, paychecks, that we have in the Roman Empire's archaeology. So this is something unique also to Masada. They brought their ballistrables and weapons, and they built the ramp that we see over here. All of that in 2 months. Here's the question. What you see here is the ramp from the Romans' perspective, right? They're about to climb this mountain. They built this ramp. And when they started to build it, they used the Roman soldiers actually built it. And then at some point when they approached the mountain, they didn't want to be attacked by the Jews. So they brought Jewish slaves from Jerusalem to build the ramp for them. It was cruel, but very, very efficient. And the Jews did not hurt them. The Jews on the top of the mountain didn't hurt their brothers that were enslaved to build the ramp. So they built the ramp, they had the tower that you see over here, and they broke through the wall. They broke through the wall, and now there was a dilemma on the top of the mountain. There was a dilemma, what should we do? According to Josephus Flavius, they had a lot. They said that every man should kill his family. Then there will be 10 men that will kill all the other men. And then they will draw a lot, and 1 man will kill the other 9 and fall on his sword and commit this mass suicide. And we will not let the Romans to enslave us, to capture us and enslave us. Freedom or slavery, that was their dilemma. According to Josephus, they chose freedom. They didn't want to be death or slavery. Between death or slavery, they said, we're choosing death and not slavery. In the top of the Masada, on the top of Masada, not too far from the bathhouse, we've actually found these 10 ostrakas that actually has names of Hebrew names, and one of them is actually Ben Yair. Ben Yair was the commander of the revolt. This one says Ben Yair, and it really made Yigael Yadin and all the other archaeologists say, "Wow, this may be really the ostrakas that Josephus is telling us about." So, what's the truth? Was there a battle on the top of Masada or not? Here's my answer going on. On the lower floor of, on the lower palace of King Herod, we have found this. What you see here is a sandal, a braid. This is the sandal over here. You can see a braid of a woman and some headscarf just over here. And we found skeletons of three people, a man, a woman, and a child, a 10-year-old child. And we really think that they were killed. They were killed, not, they didn't commit suicide. There was some marks of sword on the bones, and they were killed on the top of Masada. Okay, clue number one. Clue number two is this wall that you see over here. It's just next to the palaces, the northern palaces. And what they have found over there is a ramp, a second ramp. There was one ramp to climb to Masada, and then there was a second ramp to attack the northern complex. So 100% sure there was a battle taking place over there. Okay, how do we know? Because we found arrowheads on both sides of this ramp, meaning that the Jews were shooting the Romans were shooting the Jews. There was some battle. I can't deny if some people, I don't know if some people decided to commit suicide or not. What I do know 100% is that some people were still fighting once the Romans breached in from the ramp. And then we get to the most interesting part, the synagogue. What texts were found in that synagogue and in the rooms just next to it that makes me think these people didn't lose hope? These people were fighting, some of them were captured, and they did not lose hope. How do I know that? Because they found a few scrolls, and I want to read you what in these scrolls. It's not an entire scroll, just a little segment from it. It was like a little improvised siddur for prayer that they arranged themselves. So I'm reading to you real quickly, just 3 texts, and I think this will convince you that there was no mass suicide on the top of the mountain, but there was a battle and there was hope. It says this from Deuteronomy 34. Then Moses went up from the plains of Moab to Mount Nebo, to the top of Pisgah, which is across from Jericho. And the Lord God showed him all the land. And then it says, the Lord said to him, this is the land of which I swore to give Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, saying, I will give it to your descendants. I have caused you to see it with your eyes, but you shall not cross over there. They are reminding themselves that this land was promised to us. Okay, clue number 1. Clue number 2 is the next text. It's the text about the dry bones from the book of Ezekiel that says, the hand of the Lord came upon me and brought me out in the spirit of the Lord and set me down in the midst of the valley, and it was full of bones. Then he caused me to pass by them all around, and behold, there were very many in the open valley, and indeed they were very dry. And he said to me, Son of man, can these bones live? And I said, O Lord God, you know. So he said to me, prophesy over these bones. And prophesy over these bones and tell them, I will cause breath to enter to you and make you live, and you shall return to the land of Israel. So this is the hope for the future. In between, they're basically saying, from Psalms 83, God, please help us because your enemies, your foes are gathering around us. So this is one thing. On the top of the mountain, just next to that synagogue, there is another room, what you see over here. This room has a very special story. Inside of it, there is a rabbi that is writing Torah scrolls. So in the place where the Jewish revolt ended miserably in this enslavement, now there is a man, a Chabad rabbi, that is actually writing Torah scrolls. Here's this hope between the ruins coming out again. I will also tell you that we have bar mitzvahs on the top of the mountain. Bar mitzvahs just over there on the top of the mountain. And soldiers are swearing in, Masada shall not fall again. Take a look at these lady soldiers over here guarding in this area vis-a-vis the border with Jordan. And I'll just conclude with Titus Gate in Rome. In 1948, after the Declaration of Independence, the Jews that never walked under Titus Gate started to walk again under Titus' gate, as if to say, you guys, the Romans, you thought you'll destroy us, but we're still here, we're still standing. And if you look carefully at this picture, you will see that in Titus' gate, there is a depiction of the menorah that was taken from Jerusalem to Rome to build the Colosseum. And now they're standing next to it, triumphant, after they triumphed. So this is the story of hope between the ruins that I wanted to tell you, and how the Great Revolt has started, how it ended, and why there is a reason to be optimistic. The flag of Israel is flying just on the top of the mountain. So if there are any questions, guys, I'm here for you.
I'm going to unmute everybody. Can you unmute everybody, Itamar, so we can see if people have questions?
Are you going to talk about the parks?
What parks?
En-Gedi?
The parks.
I just mentioned En-Gedi as the place where they used to have the groves for perfumes. I just mentioned it.
Oh.
Yeah.
And the other thing is the Dead Sea is not drinkable water, is it? It's salty.
Extremely salty, more than 30% salt.
What?
More than 30% salt.
Salt.
And you said that they drank it.
No, I said they had a supply of water. They had cisterns on the top of the mountain.
Oh, so that was rainwater?
Yeah, rainwater, correct.
Yes, Lati.
The Dead Sea Scrolls, where are they now? I saw some of them at the Vatican years ago when they were still trying to piece them together. Are they all in one piece now, somewhere?
Look, in the Israel Museum, they have most of them. I think there is some in Chicago, if I remember correctly. I don't know about the Vatican. I'm not sure. If you say maybe, but I wasn't sure about that. Many of them were torn. There were many fragments of it. Yeah. And some of them were, like you said, were put together. As I said, most of them are in the Israel Museum, as far as I know.
In Jerusalem. There's a special museum called the Shrine of the Book, which has special air, special lighting, special cases where that the Dead Sea Scrolls are kept so that they can remain preserved. It's a very special museum, and it's it's part of the Israel Museum.
Did they learn a lot from those fragments? Scrolls? Yes.
Yeah, I believe that they learned very much about the lifestyle, also the lives of it. Also explained the lives of the Essenes, where it was also kept. Isn't that true? And also the actual scrolls. Itamar,
Mm-hmm.
what?
Yeah, the ancient scrolls. Some of it is biblical, like most of it is biblical scrolls. Some of it is sectarian scrolls, like rules of that sect, that interesting sect, the priests, the Kohens of Qumran. Yeah. Some external books, what we call external books that are not in the Torah and the Bible. So they're quite interesting library they had.
So in other words, a lot of the stories from the Bible are true. People now say they're fables for the most part, but if you have written material from that time, that would prove something.
Indeed.
Yeah, first, these are the most ancient biblical scrolls we have. This is 2,200 years old scrolls. And I'll say just a little comment about what you said about being fables. The Bible, we should see it not necessarily as a history book, but as a moral code and a moral guidance. This is the meaning of this. Is like these stories are about to teach us morality. So it's probably has in many cases historical core, but it's not, the focus is not to teach us history, but to teach us morality. So
thank you very much.
The way I see the Bible, you know. Yeah. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, Ruth.
No, I just have a comment. Thank you for saving my feet and my perspiration and everything else. I thank you.
So
I saved you the ticket. Here in Traveluia, we believe in saving people money here on travel and
right.
insurance.
Yeah, you have to, who needs to pack a bag? You know, you can, there's a lot to be said for armchair travel. I tell you, especially in the winter, you don't even have to put a coat on. Next month, we have a special program. We're going to be dealing with Hanukkah and a few other things. So I hope you all can join. Whitney will again send out a link to our next program, which will be in the second week of December during Hanukkah. And I also just want to say that I know that next week there's a big holiday coming up, although I'm sure it'll be somewhat subdued this year, Thanksgiving. I had heard the president-elect last night on a news conference that we got here, you know, in Israel, CNN, where he said that people should not get together with people more than groups of 10, and preferably just with people that they see all the time and still with masks and everything. So it doesn't sound like it's going to be like last year's Thanksgiving for most people, but hopefully people will abide by those recommendations and stay safe and stay healthy and stay well. And thank you all so much for joining.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
And have a wonderful holiday.
Thank you.
And please, I look forward to seeing all your faces next month, and join Itamar and I on our next program. And thank you, Whitney and Terry, for putting this together and for your partnership. We really appreciate it.
Stay safe.
Thank you.
All of
Thank
you.
Yes, stay
Thank you,
well.
guys. Appreciate it.
Bye.
You came.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Talk
Goodbye.
soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.